Imagine if you were a pilot and your plane got hijacked and forced to go somewhere else, and then it ran out of fuel, causing both engines to fail. What will you do? It is hard even to think about it, right? But in the chaos of losing to engines, compounded by the unrelenting pressure of ruthless hijackers, one man, one captain, had to summon not only bravery but brilliant intelligence to make the move that would save many lives. This isn't just any survival story, this is the story of true courage against all odds. If you heard the story of the pilot who made a split-second decision and saved dozens of lives from a deadly plane crash, write the captain name in the comments. Before we dive into today's story, have you ever wondered what it feels like when an airplane is crashing? It's not like a high-speed car crash. It's much more intense. Imagine the sheer terror of drowning. But multiplied, it's the kind of extreme panic you feel if you fall from the highest peaks of mountain, or the gut-wrenching shock of a heart attack where every second feels end of life. Studies show that the chances of a plane crash occurrence is incredibly low. For instance, in 2024, there was one fatal crash for every 900,000 flights. This means a chance of plane crash is 0.0001%. Furthermore, there was only one fatal accident. Per 5.8 million flights flown, that's almost 10 times less likely than being struck by lightning. Yet, this story is about one of those rare and terrifying events. It was November 23, 1996, a day that would go down in history, especially for Ethiopian Airlines, which is Africa's largest and most successful airline. The world had already been rocked by tragic news, but also saw miracles on that day. The flight was a routine one, from Addis Ababa to Nairobi. The Boeing 961 was carrying 163 passengers from 36 different countries, with 12 crew members, flying peacefully. But the calm would not last long after 20 minutes when three random armed men, one held a fire extinguisher, and other with an axe, stand up and run to the cockpit. And then one of them hit the co-pilot from behind and forcing him out of his seat. One of the men took his place and began threatening the captain. On the other side, the passengers were so confused about what was happening. Then the hijacker gave commands in Amharic, which is popular language that is spoken in Ethiopia, but only few understand them. Finally, the hijackers gave an order in English and French, saying that,
"If you don't do exactly what we say, we will take this plane down and no one will survive. We are 11. The others 9 are armed with bombs and sat in disguise, so if any of you try to do silly thing, we all are going down."
The moment those words were spoken, panic spread like wildfire among the passengers. And what's even more annoying is there were only 3 hijackers, not 11, yet they made everyone believe there was no way out. It still frustrates me how they outsmart all people. It was a mind game meant to frighten them and to stop them from doing anything. Wait a minute, what exactly were these hijackers up to? Who were they, and what were their intentions? Let's dig deeper. Here's what we know about them. 2 of the hijackers were high school graduates with no jobs, and the third one was a nurse. Though I can't help but wonder how someone whose nurse is supposed to care for others ended up doing this. No one knows which one was the nurse, and also their ages remain a mystery. Now, here's where it gets really strange. These hijackers had one goal, to force the plane to be diverted from Nairobi to Australia, without any stops for refueling. But here's the catch, there was not nearly enough fuel on the plane to make that journey. It's almost like they thought airplanes ran on electric power or something. How did they even think this would work? It honestly shows just how poorly they planned. But here's where the story takes a turn. The chief captain, the hero of this story, is pilot with more than 11,500 flight hours, and in fact, he had survived the hijackings twice before this one. He was no stranger to danger. The first hijacking occurred on April 12, 1992, and was carried out by 2 hijackers. The 2 hijackers tried to force the plane to fly to Canada with a hand grenade, but the hijackers were finally able to surrender after a 5-hour delay at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. The second hijacking occurred on March 17, 1995. 5 hijackers wanted to fly the plane to Sweden, but they gave up after a lot of fighting because they did not have enough fuel. The first captain survived from both hijackings safely, so he knew how to keep calm under pressure. But this time it wasn't just any hijacking. The first thing that made this hijacking especially terrifying was the fact that the hijackers claimed there were 11 armed men on board. While this was a lie, the passengers and crew were convinced it was true, heightening the fear in the air. But what made the situation even worse, and far more dangerous than any hijack the chief pilot had faced before, was the mindset of the hijackers. It was clear from their words and actions that these hijackers weren't just out to take control. They had no intention of sparing anyone's life, not even their own. In fact, they seemed more eager to die than to live, as we would later learn after the tragedy. Just imagine the horror: hijackers who were willing to crash the plane, showing no regard for the lives of the 180 passengers on board. What could have happened if those men were so desperate and reckless? The thought alone is enough to send chills down your spine. As the hijackers took control of the cockpit, the pilots tried to explain it is impossible to reach Australia, but the hijackers were relentless. Despite the pilots' desperate pleas, the 3 hijackers remained resolute in their intentions. What was even more chilling was how little they interacted with the passengers. Their sole focus seemed to be on making sure that they reached to Australia, and if anyone dared to stop them, they'd crash the plane and die along with everyone else. Even more unsettling was the fact that not a single passenger attempted to fight back. Incredibly, after the hijackers entered the cockpit, many passengers seemed to forget they were in a life-or-death situation. Some who were even became so distracted by the chaos they simply went back to reading their newspapers, almost as if it was just another disturbance. What made this whole situation even more unreal for the passengers were that the hijackers, despite their weapons and threats, seems they have no clue what were they doing. The passengers actually thought the hijackers were caught easily when the plane landed. On the other side, the hijackers hoped they could escape once they reached an airport. But what they didn't realize was that the plane was running low on fuel. When the pilot realized that the plane was running out of fuel, ignoring the hijackers' demands, he made a quick decision. He began circling the area, hoping to buy enough time to land at the main airport in Comoros. Unfortunately, when he tried to contact the airport, there was no response. The hijackers, however, continued insisting that they would only land in Australia, refusing to accept any other option. After more than 3 hours in the air, one of the plane's engines failed, causing the altitude to drop from 29,000 feet to 25,000 feet. The hijackers now understood that the pilots were no longer following their orders. Angered and desperate, the hijackers threatened to blow up the plane, realizing that their control over the situation was slipping away. The tension in the cabin grew intense as they became more unpredictable, knowing the plane was running out of time and options. Meanwhile, the passengers had no idea just how close they were to disaster. To make matters worse, as the 3 hijackers plotted their next move just outside the cockpit door, the chief pilot seized a fleeting moment to speak to the passengers. His voice crackled over the intercom, trembling with urgency, and said,
"Listen carefully. We're running out of fuel. One of the engines is completely burnt out. I need to be honest with you, there's no way we're making it out of this alive."
The calmness that had held the passengers in check shattered instantly. A wave of panic surged through the cabin. Faces went pale, children cried. Some people gripped their armrests, others whispered frantic prayers. The moment the chief pilot spoke to the passengers, the situation began to unravel. The plane, already teetering from the damage, suddenly vibrating violently, its wings flapping wildly. As the craft tilted dangerously to one side, the sudden shift threw the passengers into a shock. Many of them jumped to their feet, protesting, but the pilot said,
"Please, sit down. For your own safety. The plane is going down. I thought we could pull through. But not anymore. Even if the hijackers agreed to make the plane land, and also message from the Comoros Airlines arrived that permit the plane could land. It was too late for everything. If we tried to land there, the plane would not reach the airport. So put pillows under your head, and don't open your airbag in the airplane. It will make it hard to get out of the plane. But I will try to land on the sea to make it safe landing as much as I could. The plane could shatter into piece. Try to swim out as soon as possible and inflate the life jacket. And if you survived, these 3 hijackers were responsible for this plane crash.
When the hijacker heard this, they were so angry and start fighting the pilots in the middle of the fight. The assistant pilot cover for the chief pilot, and the chief pilot tried to land the plane on the water, which is descending at speeds of up to 200 miles per hour. This was a smart move to make in all of these pressure. The decision not to go to the Comoros airplane prevent a massive damage, since the plane would crash before it lands and also would harm the local people. Moreover, making the plane land on water prevent the plane from catching fire when it falls from 25,000 feet. But when the plane hit the water with extremely high force, the plane broke into 3 pieces on the water. This is how Ethiopian Airlines B-961 Boeing jet crashed, 500 meters from the Galawa Resort on the Comoros Island, and 16 miles from Comoros Moroni Airport. Although most of the passengers survived the initial crash, but they had disregarded or did not understand or did not hear captain warning not to inflate their life jackets inside the aircraft, causing them to be pushed against the ceiling of the fuselage by the inflated life jackets when water flooded in. Unable to escape, they drowned. Estimated 60 to 80 passengers, strapped to their seats, presumably drowned. The islanders, including a team of tourists, a rescue team, and some French and Indian doctors on vacation, did their best to help the survivors, but they managed to save 50 of the 175 people on board, thanks to the pilots. Surprisingly, of the 3 hijackers and the pilots in the cockpit, only the 2 pilots were survived. Of the survivors, 6 were crew members and 44 were passengers. Surprisingly, 4 of the 50 passengers survived without any injuries. There were 36 nationalities on board the plane, with Djibouti, Italy, Lesotho, and Uganda being the only countries to have lost anyone. The country with the most casualties was Nigeria, which lost 19 of its citizens in the crash. Other countries lost between 16 up to 1 person. Despite the trauma the 2 pilots had endured, both returned to their jobs. They didn't just walk away from their careers, they resumed flying, continuing to serve the aviation industry with honor. These were not fictional heroes from books or movies. These were real men who faced death, fought it, and then got back into the cockpit to fly again. In the months that followed, they received numerous awards and accolades for their bravery. Among the honors bestowed upon them was the Flight Safety Foundation Professionalism in Flight Safety Award, a recognition of their unmatched courage and professionalism under unimaginable pressure. Their actions had saved lives, and the aviation world knew that their quick thinking and unwavering commitment had turned a fatal situation into a story of survival. After hearing this incredible story, write a comment if you heard this story before, and if you know this brave captain names. This the real image of the hero pilots, and the footage of the plane split second before the crush.